Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 254 for Monday, July 17th, 2023. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny, also known as Pixelriffs without a PC. Hello, sir.
Hello. Yes, I am still without a PC. You can hear more about that in The Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast, which our patrons get to listen to. You can subscribe at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You'll get invited to our Discord, and you'll get a private RSS feed with a bunch of extra content on there, including an extended version of the show. We've also heard about Joel's latest qualifications as a barbecue pit master, which are going to be assessed, I think, by some of our friends in that area. But our patrons also get a bunch of extra stuff and have been responsible for unlocking various tiers of different stuff we do on the podcast. Today is our Chunk Mail Dispenser episode, which is one of our early milestone goals that we hit. And we're also going to have probably a 2-month edition of the monthly Minecraft Hangout with our patrons, hopefully towards the end of the month, providing I have my PC back. And that's where everybody gets to share their stories for what they've been doing in Minecraft on the last couple of months. And this will be rescheduled from one where we were going to be talking about everybody's 1.20 adventures, so I'm sure people have a whole library of things that they want to share with us. The quarterly Hangout date is also going to be confirmed, but that's where we share all of the behind-the-scenes facts and figures about the way the podcast looks, viewers-wise, listeners-wise, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in any of that, once again, patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
So I know you have not been recording new episodes of the Survival Guide with the PC out for repair, but what's new? What has been published on the YouTube channel this week?
So yeah, this week on the Minecraft Survival Guide, because I've not played any Minecraft for a week. The most recent episode today is covering huge copper and iron veins. So I found a couple of those quite early in the caving experience around this base, and I eyeballed the huge iron vein straight away and thought that's going to be really useful, but I didn't really want to tackle it until a bit later once we had fortune and could get as much of it out of the vein as possible. And I even considered for a while setting up an iron farm, setting up a copper farm, and then sort of measuring their output against the output from mining that stuff manually with fortune and everything, which I've done with iron veins in the past, but now I know how to make a proper high output copper farm. I was considering doing that. But I thought, let's at least start things out with the basic mining experience before we bring all of the technical stuff in as well, and I expect I'll be able to find a huge copper vein somewhere else that I can benchmark that against. So that's naturally going to set up the rest of this week's episodes, which are about automated smelting and then beekeeping, because of course you need a lot of honeycomb to wax the copper, and that's going to lead into honey blocks and more technical stuff with those, all of the other things you can do with honeycomb. The fact that you can wax signs now is also a fun aspect of having a honeycomb farm nice and early, so that's helping my storage get organized. Earlier in the week, I introduced automatic sugarcane farming and got some really helpful tips from my community, actually, on how to make a more effective farm, because I'd known about the quasi-connectivity methods of breaking sugarcane, which effectively allow you to break sugarcane individually instead of having that row of observers where all of the pistons break at once. And I always knew that it was more effective to have the pistons kind of firing individually instead of all in one big cluster, but then people corrected me on some of the technical behind-the-scenes stuff about how sugarcane grows and stuff like that. So once again, Survival Guide being a learning experience for viewers is also a massive learning experience for me, because there are always going to be people who have specialist knowledge that I haven't quite touched on yet. Nice. Note to self, introduce mud blocks soon, because you can grow sugarcane on mud blocks, and then if it's broken by pistons and falls on the mud, hoppers can still collect that from underneath without the need for a hopper minecart system, because it's not a full block. So that was another thing, but now that I have a bunch of iron from mining out that huge iron vein, definitely going to have enough to make some more hoppers, right? So naturally, these things all kind of feed into themselves. And in between those two things, I took an introductory look at potion brewing, which was still missing a few potions. I haven't been to the end to get Dragon's Breath yet. I haven't got enough turtle breeding done to have a Turtle Master potion, but those are definitely the less essential potions. And I got to explore some fun mechanics that people often forget about, like the way if you splash a creeper with a splash potion, when it explodes, it leaves behind a lingering potion cloud, similar to lingering potions that you craft yourself. So, like, there's some cool stuff with potion brewing that I feel like doesn't get touched on as often, but I was able to go into a cave, use night vision to look around, and really kind of show people the ins and outs of basic potion brewing. So, had a lot of fun with that episode. I was really happy with that one. And, this week, a bit more automatic smelting and an automatic honeycomb farm to round things out.
So now that you're into potion brewing and doing some automation, are you looking at doing like automated potion brewing?
Maybe at some stage. I think that's maybe further down the line. Probably set up a small auto brewer for something that you're going to need a lot of, like fire resistance potions.
Water breathing.
Yeah, water breathing, that kind of stuff. And sooner or later, like this obviously branches off into so many different activities. Like once I have a decent supply of water breathing potions, I can start to look at ocean monuments and go brushing ocean ruins for more like archaeology stuff and pottery sherds and like sniffer eggs and stuff like that. You know, there's a ton of different ways that it can go from here. And that's even before we get to the end and talking about shulker boxes and everything else. So I'm sort of spoiled for choice when the PC gets back. And in the meantime, I'm probably going to start making a list of like, this is the order I want to tackle some of these topics, because I keep reminding myself, oh yeah, horses. I should be talking about horses, and camels are new. And there's so many different aspects of the game that I keep having to remind myself exist for the purposes of making tutorials about them.
I should have remembered the whole mud block tip when I was making my bamboo farm. Although I say that now and I don't remember or know whether you can grow bamboo on mud blocks.
I think you should be able to. I think it can grow most of the stuff that dirt can, with the exception of like farm crops. I'm pretty sure that's how it works, but don't quote me on that just in case it turns out to be wrong.
Yeah, because I had to put like a hopper minecart, and it's different with bamboo because bamboo actually has like a hitbox. So if a piece of bamboo falls on the bottom piece of bamboo that's there, it will like hover there. There's a little bit of loss in the like the little farm that I made for the last couple of weeks to give myself like a double chest of bamboo. Was like there was a little bit of a loss happening because every now and again a bamboo item would land on the stump of the bamboo and just going to hover there and not get picked up. Whereas sugarcane doesn't have that hitbox. I have a model, like I have a texture pack for sugarcane that gives it a 3D box from Vanilla Tweaks, I think. But sugarcane, like you can walk through sugarcane, whereas you can't walk through bamboo. So I'm curious about, that, because that would certainly help with like my bamboo farm designs, because a lot of people do like the flying machine one. I was doing a piston one that just kind of snapped all the pistons at once whenever any bamboo grew. So like, again, kind of like the very straightforward way that you would have approached it at first before you made all your tweaks and stuff. But what I'm curious about, and I think I did this once in a bamboo farm when I was first playing with them on a snapshot world, where I made sure that the pistons like stayed out a little bit longer, and it kind of like helped push everything forward. And so the bamboo could not fall on the stump because the stump was covered up. Yeah. And ultimately, when the pistons retracted, there was a greater chance of that last bamboo item not landing on the stump and landing somewhere just off to the side, so it could get collected.
Yeah. There's definitely a few ins and outs with different farms, but I think it's a mechanic that's worth exploring. You can plant a surprising amount of stuff on mud. As far as the bamboo farm goes, have you found like any uses for bamboo around West Hill this week, or is it still not quite fitting in with the color palette?
No, it doesn't fit in with the color palette. I haven't really explored much of that. I've used some new items from 1.20, but I've not used a lot of the new textures because they haven't quite found their way into West Hill. I did play with some cherry wood this week, though. I took a break from West Hill actually, and Cosmic, servermate and moderator in our chat, had a request. They had a sniffer farm where, of course, flowers. So the sniffers were digging up pitcher plants and torchfire plants. Well, they're digging up the seeds for the torch flower plant and the pitcher plant, and at a pretty good clip actually. And so they wanted a minecart collection underneath it. Pretty standard, nothing crazy. The minecart doesn't even stop. It just kind of continuously dumps things into a hopper that's goes into a little water stream, which I just thought would be aesthetic at the top. And so I encased the water stream in some pink glass and some cherry wood trapdoors, and then used cherry logs and cherry wood and cherry leaves or cherry blossoms rather, and then the pink petals all around it with a pink shulker box. There was a lot of pink by request, which goes to match the aesthetic, because the the Sniffer farm has like a cherry wood fence lattice work with like extinguished campfires and hanging kind of cherry blossoms. So I kind of made it to match. But even in once I got all the mechanics set up in the basement, which was like an hour, I then had the other hour to like decorate the outside. And in that 1 hour, there was more than half a stack of each kind of seed. And Cosmic only has like 3 sniffers going around this very small area. Like it's not a massive field. And I thought, okay, that's cool. So it was my first experience with sniffers. It was my first experience really playing with cherrywood. And it was fun. It's very pretty. It's not like I don't like it. It just doesn't match West Hill now. I might be able to sneak it into like some of the bedrooms in the keep or like some fancy places. Maybe I might be able to do it. But for now, I've not used it in any of my builds yet. I really like the stripped cherry logs. Yeah. They're very soft. They're light textured. I can see them being used for things other than looking like wood. Like I can see it being used for like pink highlights in a sci-fi build or stuff like that. Steampunk or even cyberpunk. Like there's a bunch of different uses for them. And the cherry trapdoors are also very cool too. Very decorative. So I can see a lot of uses for that. So I really enjoyed messing with those. I really had a lot of fun randomly scattering the pink petals around and just kind of like turning my player different directions to get like random patterns, like all kinds of really fun stuff. The possibilities there are really cool. We actually have an email about that later. And I went back to West Hill and I was tempted to do more work with cherry blossoms, but ultimately I feel like I should start working on like the inside of the library and the keep. And so I started adding the details inside of the West Hill keep. I started with the basement stairs and then I worked my way up to the East Hall library. And I had always intended for this to be a room full of books, but then I put this giant window situation on the east face of it, which gives a lot of really nice light, especially first thing in the morning. And I ended up doing the wall kind of like behind you and along the sides, just kind of like a giant U of chiseled bookshelves. And I was holding off on this on purpose because I knew that this update was coming. And so I added in a ton of chiseled bookshelves. I had to scour the server looking for leather so I could make more books because it took like 4 or 5 stacks of books to fill this all in. But I love the color it adds to the room. I really enjoyed the changes that I made to the floor. I changed the floor to have deep slate tile, and then I did like a warped hyphae, warped wood, and prismarine carpet. Like I just kind of inlaid blocks into the ground to make it look like a carpet. And really, really happy with the way that it came out. I love that the color choices in the bookshelves, while a little limiting sometimes, because you'll find that if you're randomly scattering books around, if you're not paying attention, you'll end up with like, wow, there's like 6 purple books all in this one corner. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to move a few things around. But they've got magenta books, they've got kind of like teal, they've got blue, they've got green. So you can really kind of play on the colors that are present in the bookshelves to choose an accent color. I originally had a red carpet, but it looked kind of evil with the black floor. So
yeah, a little bit Dracula's castle kind of aesthetic.
Yeah, it looked like a Disney villain library, you know?
Yeah.
And so I decided to dial it back. I tried some purple, and that was okay, because there are those purple books, like I said, in the bookshelves. But ultimately, there's green and like a light blue kind of teal book. And I had used some warped hyphae in the indentations above the bookshelves in my design to add some color. Mm-hmm. And then I used that in the floor. So the whole thing kind of ties together. The light blue glass, it's not cyan glass. I think I've got cyan glass in the other hall. So I may actually go back and like double down and remove the light blue glass in the windows and replace it with cyan glass just to kind of really make it all feel cohesive. But the light blue works too, because there's a lot of blue in the bookshelves. And so I was really happy with the way that they worked out. The rest of the builds were really hard to get screenshots of because it's the hallway leading up to the bookshelf room, and it's like a 3x3 hallway, so it's hard to get a screenshot. And I just continued the floor from the hall with some changes. I'm trying to like figure out how to do a bunch of different things inside and have it all tied together. The best decisions I've ever made is having my walls be 2 blocks thick. So as I'm designing most of the interiors, they don't really affect the room next to them.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say that. They don't affect the outside wall. which is good.
And you've got room to add like a wood panel kind of effect in this library room with the bookshelves, and it's not going to add a wood panel wall to the neighboring room, which might be like the kitchen or something where that really wouldn't feel appropriate.
Yeah, there is one shared wall because, again, like I had to renovate the keep, and there's one shared wall in the hallway that's actually the back of the chimney. And so I had to change the idea of the hallway from a stone and andesite hallway to a brick hallway because I preferred the brick look inside the chimney when you're in the kitchen looking into the fireplace. And so I made that change. But the good news was that like the outside wall of the keep has a too thick, block wall. So me changing the inside to brick did not affect the outside, which is all andesite and all stone and has that gradient and all that kind of stuff. So it really worked out quite well. I was quite happy with it. And I'm looking forward to more. The one thing that kind of, I guess, held me back from really calling this done, the data pack that I use, Tables and Chairs, which is an older version of it, is now not working in 1.20. And whenever I break a chair or try to place a new table, I just get the trapdoor, which is how they're used. There's some sort of data that's attached to the trapdoor, and then that's used to then display the model of the chair that you want.
Yeah.
And the issue there is that like that means that I can't break or move anything in West Hill that's a chair or table or part of this data pack because I can't replace it. I can't build the carpentry table. I can't make a new chair. I can't do anything. And so my fear is that the new update to this data pack, which I believe has been rewritten, will then either remove or like cause all of my old tables and chairs to display as trapdoors. And I don't want to go around this entire town and replace tables and chairs. Like it would take forever.
Yeah.
And so I have to figure out if I can use both data packs at once, like use the new one to make new stuff, but then use the old one so that the other stuff displays properly. And it just kind of takes me down this, frustrating rabbit hole of when you're working with mods and when you're working with data packs and they have been updated, quote unquote, but then the author has changed the way that everything works, thus breaking the way that everything worked before for like no apparent reason. And it really gets frustrating. And I mean, like, there's nothing you can do. It's the risk you take when you're, using a community written mod or a data pack. And again, I like the data pack. I think it's a great idea and it adds a lot. I've certainly sung its praises on the Citadel, but it just gets to that point where you're like, God, like I really wish that this kind of stuff was more under my control or had some sort of, I don't want to say quality assurance, but like I wish there was some sort of like checkbox to have a data pack work with Minecraft that meant that it had to be backwards compatible or something like that. Again, first world problem. It's just one of those things where like I'm just really disappointed because I really wanted to put a table and chair and stuff in the library and some candles on it, like really complete the mood. And I had the time to tie this all up on the weekend, and now I have to remember to go back and add a table at some point when and if I can get it fixed.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think you get more of that assurance of it working in perpetuity from things like the Bedrock Edition marketplace, where a lot of the creators of those maps, in order to keep them online, have to make sure that they're compatible with future versions. When we were playing I forget exactly which one it was, but there was a Skyblock pack that I think was Cobble Clicker or something like that. It was like it was all about like unlocking stuff for how much cobble that you generated using a cobblestone generator and how much you'd mined. And cobblestone basically became like currency. And like that, I think, went through a version update whilst we were still playing that map, and they had to make sure it was compatible with, I think, like 1.15 or 1.16 or whatever before it could be re-uploaded to the marketplace and people could continue to play it. So on the one hand, you have the likelihood of things disappearing forever if the map maker doesn't want to continue supporting it or doesn't have the resources to continue supporting it. But on the other hand, it's going to be reliable if it does stay there. Obviously, perhaps not something you want to apply to a long-term world like the Citadel, but I mean, the Citadel's been around since what? Like, you started this world in 1.12, 1.13, like around that sort of time?
Just before 1.13, yeah.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It would have been, we'd actually discussed it, and I think Thursday of last week or Friday of last week was the anniversary, 6 years on the server.
Wow.
And
it's a long time. Even
is a
for
long time.
You hear about people having long-term servers, but based on my own gameplay, I don't really keep a world for longer than a few years, and 6 years is a pretty substantial pedigree at this point.
Yeah, no, and it does go back to just before 1.13. I started playing just as 1.12 dropped, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe, yeah. So no, I played for a year in 1.12 and then 1.13 dropped and then we started the podcast.
Yeah. It's a good way of remembering it, I guess.
Yeah. You're asking me to remember before the pandemic, which is like, that was 12 years ago, right? What?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's been a while. And I think that is one other thing too, is that why I'm not fiercely complaining about this. It's just, I'm kind of like getting on my little soapbox because, I am in a unique situation. Most players do not have a world that lasts this long. And if they are rolling forward with the new updates and every once in a while resetting their worlds, then they're obviously going to be downloading the newer data packs, and the old stuff that's on there doesn't matter because it's not there. Like they're in a new world and their new tables and chairs or their new map or whatever it is that they're doing is going to work correctly. So yeah, it's one of those things where I know I'm in a very unique situation, but anyway, I'm hoping to find a solution because I really like this data pack, and I'd like to try and move forward with it because it's really useful in the modern city as well, because you can use quartz and obsidian to make chairs, to make white and black plastic looking chairs, which is great for a clean look in a modern city, again, rather than just quartz stairs being a chair.
There were a few really neat chair designs that had been shared in our community Discord recently. I think it's in the Your Base channel or somewhere around there. Somebody posted a picture of a scaffolding chair using a bamboo trapdoor as the back of the chair, and how well those two go together, obviously being made of largely the same material. And so yeah, there are certainly options, but obviously if it's something you've been relying on for the aesthetic and the sub-block detail of it all, the fact that your the seat of your chair isn't level with the top of the table in most of the chair designs you've been using. So yeah, I can see it being difficult to make the switch that way.
Moving on into the news this week, Minecraft Bedrock Edition 1.20.10 has been released. That was updated and arrived on Tuesday, July 11th. Parity features in update 1.20.10. Players' hitbox height now reduces to 1.5 blocks while sneaking. Sneaking will automatically be initiated while struck in a gap of less than 1.8 blocks. Sneaking lowers the player camera height accordingly. Sneaking now requires enough space to stand in order to exit crouch. Players will transition from swimming to sneaking if they are unable to stand up but would be able to crouch. Players are no longer able to sneak while riding, and players no longer suffocate when sneaking in certain scenarios. Items dropped by storage entities are now centered inside the nearest block. Shovel has been removed from the boat recipe. Barrel recipe has been moved to use planks instead of sticks. Cobwebs can no longer be broken down into 9 string, and fixed a bug where zombie villagers did not drop a held item if they were cured. Experimental features in 1.20.10, crawling. Added the ability to crawl behind the short sneaking and crawling experimental toggle, created a new player crawling animation. Players will now begin crawling when in a 1-block gap, similar to sneaking. With the exception of the new animation, this works much the same as crawling does in Java, so we don't need to explain with it in the same depth that the changelog provides. Recipe unlocking. We've had the recipe unlocking has been added to the Bedrock Edition as an experimental feature. Collect materials to unlock relevant recipes. A notification will tell you when you found a new crafting material. Picking up an item teaches you how to craft that item. Great for when a friend gives you a tool you haven't crafted before. Technical changes and bug fixes in 1.20.10. Many more actions now emit vibrations detected by Skulk sensors. The camera position is now used for audio system listening and ambient sounds. Previously, the player position and rotation were sometimes used for audio listening. This effectively flips audio panning when using third-person front camera perspective. Fixed over 50 community-reported issues. There are too many to list here, but a full list appears in the Minecraft.net blog post linked in our show notes.
Yeah, there are a couple of really nice changes for Bedrock Edition here, and I follow a few Bedrock Edition creators who are excited about some of them and kind of miffed about some others. I think first and foremost, I think it's really important that sneaking is now at parity with Java Edition. So that being able to like crouch underneath a slab that's at that kind of like top half of the 2-block height and being able to sneak underneath that, you can use that to create effectively doors that prevent zombies or like full-size zombies from following you. You can block villagers in some place and then still sneak out of the doorway. There are a few really useful situations for just like day-to-day gameplay in which that's kind of a nice thing to have, and it's certainly something I've taken for granted about Java Edition for quite a while.
I am surprised that sneaking parity was not already in the game for Bedrock. I can't remember when that came in. Was it 1.13 with
no
swimming?
it was more recent than that for Java Edition, at least with being able to change the height like that. I think we think about it being a thing in Java Edition because when swimming was introduced, that's when Elytra crawling suddenly felt less glitchy, right? And then after that, right, I think is when they ironed out all of the mechanics of if you open a trap door on yourself, you go down to that kind of crawling position.
Right.
But I do think, yeah, like some of the stuff like being less than 2 blocks tall when you're sneaking underneath something has only arrived fairly recently. And I know it's experimental now for Bedrock Edition, but I'm pretty sure that crawling behavior is going to arrive in the full release. I think that's probably just going to be subject to a lot of community testing and ironing out some bugs, because there are already a few situations, that one of which was mentioned in the changelog, of like Bedrock Edition players taking random damage and suffocation damage at certain times when they're just like pillaring up or sneaking in a weird place or something. So potentially that needs a little bit more time under the hood before it's available for like a full release. But the fact that it's got a dedicated crawling animation, I'm not certain is the case with Java. I'm fairly certain that the Java crawling animation is really just the swimming animation, and it's always just kind of looked like you are crawling, so nobody really noticed. But I do kind of wonder if a dedicated crawling animation is going to arrive on Java in future as a result of them trying to make crawling look a little bit more natural on Bedrock.
I mean, I'm all for the crawling animation. I've always thought that, well, it's convenient that we can fit into a 1-block space now in Java Edition, that it looks really silly swimming around.
Yeah.
I don't see it very much because I don't do much third-person camera work, but I watch a lot of YouTubers that do, and when they stop to look at the camera and they're like kind of swimming in the air and their head is kind of funky sideways, you're like, this looks really awkward. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I used it actually this past week when I did the Sniffer collection, because I had a hopper minecart that only had the one space. You know, I made a couple of errors with the laying of the minecart rails, and I had to go in and fix them. And so I used the swimming animation to kind of like reach a little bit farther and get into that 1-block gap. But I don't think I used a trapdoor. I think I just like jumped and then double tapped the elytra and kind of like slid into the space to do that. But I like the idea of a crawling animation. I don't know how you make a Minecraft player crawl without knees.
Yeah.
That to me is a little bit strange. I haven't seen the animation, so I have to look it up. But one thing that I hope comes to Bedrock along with this sneaking change, with the height of the character dropping to 1.5 blocks, is something that I really enjoy and don't take for granted, but was nice to be reminded of today. You can reach farther down now in Java when you crouch, in terms of breaking and placing blocks when you're building. If you're looking downward and you crouch, you get extra reach where you still couldn't do it before, because even though you were kind of sneaking, your player didn't actually register as lower. It just kind of did an animation. Whereas with this new height change, you can actually reach, I think, 4 blocks instead of 3 going down. I hope Bedrock is the same, because it's a game changer when you're like up on something and you're trying to decorate a wall, or you're trying to reach something and you're building on scaffolding. Like, having that extra bit of reach is good. I say that on scaffolding. Never mind, you can't do that on scaffolding. But like if you're on dirt scaffolding and you want to crouch and reach down, it's a game changer.
I mean, you can do it on scaffolding. You just have to be out on one of the arms of the scaffolding, and it's scaffolding's different on Bedrock Edition anyway. Again, going back to other things that need parity changes, like it controls and places slightly differently, and Bedrock Edition players can even do that thing where you place a block in front of you to bridge instead of having to look down and look at the block you just placed to make a bridge and kind of bridge backwards. So there's still a few things that are going to be slightly different about that experience. But I agree. I think that's a a really nice way of, like, you build a stone wall, you're like, oh, I can probably break out a couple of blocks while I'm standing on top of this and add in some texture from up here instead of having to ladder up from the ground. As far as the crafting recipe changes and stuff go as well, those are largely parity changes, and I saw a few people kind of grousing about the fact that it makes sense to have a shovel in the boat crafting recipe, like it's got flavor and you're kind of homogenizing it, but then I do think it makes crafting boats a little bit awkward if you have to have a shovel for everyone, considering shovels aren't stackable items and neither are boats, but you still need all of the planks for the wood and everything. So hopefully that's just a change everyone's gonna enjoy ultimately, like not having to spend as much time crafting stuff to get a fleet of boats going. Especially with being able to lead boats in Bedrock Edition as well. I expect that's coming in useful for all kinds of stuff, with chest boats being able to drag half your inventory behind you with a lead kind of makes more sense. So hopefully people aren't too opposed to not having to craft a shovel anymore.
I was surprised that barrels used sticks. It's great that they fixed it. It's great that it's a parity change, but like, why were they using sticks in the first place? Like, did Bedrock and Java just not talk to each other on that?
I mean, see, I think barrels using sticks, again, makes sense for flavor, because if you imagine the way a barrel is made, it's like kind of individual planks of wood that are like curved outwards, right? And so, and so those strips of wood, you would imagine, are probably closer to the width of a stick than they are the width of a plank in Minecraft terms. But even then, yeah, I think it just makes more sense for the recipes to be the same across both versions. And so they probably just disagreed initially on the implementation. That was back in 1.14 when parity was only really starting to become a major mission for both halves of the studio to work on. And I do think it makes sense for the recipes just to add up in that way. The other thing is uncrafting cobwebs into 9 string, which sounds really convenient for Bedrock Edition because of mob spawning not being as exploitable as Java Edition. You know, I find it hard enough finding spiders on Java as it is without worrying about Bedrock Edition mob spawning, where you get one mob every couple of chunks half the time, you know? But there are still spider spawners and stuff out there as well, and I don't know if uncrafting cobwebs into 9 string really felt balanced, when if you break a cobweb with a sword, you get maybe 1 string out of that, and it's like it feels kind of unnecessary to have that crafting recipe in the game when there are so many other effective ways of getting string.
I don't think we have the uncrafting cobweb recipe. We have a couple of data packs on the server that we've had for so long that I forget what's vanilla sometimes. I know we can craft cobwebs with a slime ball and 8 cobwebs around the outside of it in a crafting table.
Yeah.
And I know that we can pack and unpack string into wool. Yeah. I think we did that instead of cobwebs. Like, I think our wool string is what we have instead of the cobweb string. And we had a triple spider spawner, and one of the reasons I wanted that data pack was purely to be able to store all the string. Compress it into blocks, you know. And it was easier than shearing sheep, and it's not like it's a big like game changer, because if you want colored wool, you still have to dye all this white wool that you have. So I think I did it because I was making an Enderman farm, and I wanted all the carpet for like spawn proofing stuff, and I needed a ton of carpet, and I needed to use the string to get it, and I thought that was the easiest way rather than shearing sheep and stuff. So, but yeah, I like the idea of the cobwebs, but at the same time, like, you know, crafting or going back and forth between string and a cobweb, I can see why they would remove it, just to kind of make the cobwebs more special.
Yeah, just to kind of iron things out. It seems like one of those things that it made sense for Bedrock Edition to have, but I guess maybe they couldn't justify adding it to Java. So the only recourse at that point would just have been to remove it from Bedrock for the sake of balance and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's good to at least have some news to talk about, and I'm not sure what we're going to have in the upcoming weeks with regards to any future, you know, snapshots for minor updates to Java Edition or anything like that. But at least, yeah, we got a bit of an update from Bedrock Edition as well.
Moving on to chunk mail. This week is our chunk mail dispenser, so we'll be focusing on email for the remainder of the show. If you'd like to email the show, you can send that into spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it on point, and it has a good chance of being read on the show if you've got something fun to say and talk about. And I want to give a shout out and thank you to the folks that have been writing in recently and if you happen to be a Patreon member, indicating that you're a patron and a landscape artist or whatever level you happen to be in our Patreon in the subject line is a huge help to organizing the emails, and it helps me keep track and being able to say thank you to people when they're in our email and they are a member of the community. So very much appreciate that.
Absolutely. This first email comes in from Twixie Indigo, who is a landscape artist member of our Discord, and the subject is the future of archaeology. Listening to your recent thoughts about future updates to archaeology, it occurred to me that things like suspicious dirt probably won't happen because dirt isn't affected by gravity. I think part of what makes archaeology fun is that you need to be slow and methodical, and not letting the suspicious blocks fall as you dig seems to be a big part of that. One future update that could be good, however, would be to add archaeology to the Nether, since gravel already generates there. It would be a slightly more dangerous dig due to all the lava and mobs, but that could be interesting. What do you think? What do you think could be found in the Nether with archaeology? Twixie was slain by a piglin brute while trying to do archaeology in a bastion remnant.
On the surface, I think this is a great idea. We've talked about archaeology and some of the things that they've added in 1.20 as being a expandable update. They can add more later should they desire. And the Nether is a prime example for not only would you have, the gravel and the predetermined danger that's already there, but then the world is your oyster as to what you want to create for what you're digging up. Is archaeology in the Nether going to be civilization based? Is it going to be maybe they switch into paleontology? Are we going to be digging up dragon bones? What do we find in the Nether? What does the Ghast skeleton look like? I don't know. Just that kind of stuff could be really cool. There's already some fossils and skeletons that happen in, I think it's the Soul Sand Valleys, and I'm really curious as to how that would work and how tricky it would be, because again, when we did that stream with Ulraf and Archeoplays, we had to really be careful when we were using tools that were not enchanted and trying to go slowly through all of this stuff. And we all know once you get to a certain level, you can blitz through netherrack like nothing.
Yeah.
And which could also then cause gravel to fall and remove your suspicious gravel or your suspicious sand. That to me is really, really cool. I'd love for them to add a new type of sand to the Nether, like nether sand, or something like that had something like suspicious sand that has gravity applied to it and could fall, that kind of stuff. They could also just use suspicious soul sand, and just have that. That would be a hard texture to spot too, because soul sand already has a lot going on. I'm all for it. I don't know what could be in it, but I think that's a huge opportunity for imagination.
I mean, why stop at the Nether as well? You have the opportunity to add stuff like that to the end. People have been wanting an end update for a while, so there's potential there for archaeology to expand into other dimensions. And yeah, I agree. Suspicious soul sand seems like a fun way of doing it. And while I agree with the first part of the email that consistency is important for the suspicious blocks and the mechanics matching the block as you normally find it makes sense, but I can see them making an exception for blocks which feel like a good candidate for an archaeology expansion. So suspicious dirt being affected by gravity might not be so far-fetched, and then if you're successful in brushing it, it just turns into a block of dirt and the block of dirt stays there. It doesn't sound awful. In fact, there might even be some fun stuff that you can do with that mechanics-wise, so I'm kind of curious how they'd implement that if they wanted to. But then yeah, suspicious soul sand. The idea, obviously, of doing more with, say, the fossil structures that appear in soul sand valleys, or around the feet of a nether fortress, or something like that. There'd be some fun to be had there. And I recognize that the fossils kind of leans more into paleontology, but what if those are sites of worship for piglins? What if those end up having artifacts and stuff from a previous time? What if you just find more bones there and it turns out to have been some sort of burial ground? There's some fun stuff that you can do with that, adding flavor to that area of the Nether. And soul sand valleys don't really have a lot of unique aspects to them in the same way that generating nether fortresses and bastions, they're sort of, largely speaking, they're biome agnostic. They happen wherever in the Nether, perhaps less in basalt deltas, but it's kind of nice to introduce a bit of individual character to the Soul Sand Valley where it feels kind of desolate compared to the rest of the Nether.
And Soul Sand Valleys are sort of the deserts of the Nether.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which is where archaeology, I think, started in the overworld. Little devil's advocate here. Are bastions not already a sort of archaeology? Like they're not always intact, right? They aren't they kind of beaten down and fallen apart and stuff. I guess they're populated, so at
it's
point, is it still archaeology? I don't know.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? It's like you can get a read on some aspects of Piglin civilization from going through their chests, but then they will also be there to discourage you from doing that. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting conundrum there. But I do think it's possible to learn stuff about Piglin civilization, which is sort of the core of what archaeology is, right? You're kind of trying to understand the civilization or the people from what they've left behind, from objects that they would use and that kind of thing, and the stuff that they value. So yeah, I do think having a bastion as Nether archaeology does sort of make sense. And it makes sense that if you wanted to add more brushable blocks in there, then a bastion would be a good candidate to do that. It also makes sense with how structures are generated, because all you need to do would be to add a couple of suspicious gravel blocks somewhere within a bastion, and with the amount of broken down floors and stuff like that, it would be very easy for a block to fall unexpectedly. So you can have sort of suspicious gravel hovering between floors on a bastion and brush that to get hold of maybe a snout armor trim or something like that. In terms of what artifacts we'd find in the Nether, you're potentially looking at finding out more about Piglin civilization. So really an extension of what we already have in bastions already. So I'd expect the loot table to be quite similar there. Alternatively, it could be a hint at whoever, if not the Piglins, has left behind all of the ruined Nether portals, and signs that there was previously a connection between the Nether and the overworld that players are there to kind of restore.
I like the idea of getting some gold artifacts, or maybe not to just have another kind of pot, but to have some sort of different sherd, like some sort of like a black pot sherd or a gold pot sherd. I don't want it to be another pot, but like you get the idea of like something else that comes in fragments that then you can then assemble.
Yeah.
It would be a familiar game mechanic. If you've done archaeology and pottery stuff in the overworld, then when you find a Piglin monument sherd or something, I guess sherd is technically part of pottery, but like if it was some sort of vessel that was different, I think that could be really interesting and give you, again, something else to decorate your builds with, and also kind of like a badge of honor. Like if you have this on display in your Minecraft build on the overworld, and other players either watching you in a Let's Play or on your server or whatever would be like, oh wow, you had to go to the Nether, do archaeology in a bastion, deal with all the Piglins, like fight them off and do all that kind of stuff just to get this pretty thing that sits in the corner. Like that's a kind of a cool flex,
Yeah, and G2B brings up it could be an interesting tie-in to the lore of something like Minecraft Legends, and even Minecraft Dungeons, where the Piglin civilization has a bit more technology to it, and it's very kind of diesel punk kind of clockwork and gears and steampunk kind of driven technology. And so if they wanted to introduce a more mechanical element, something similar to what you've seen in Create Mod, for example, then having cogs that you could only dig up from the remains of a Piglin machine in a Bastion Remnant or something similar would be a wild way of doing that. I think that'd be a really fun way of expanding archaeology into something that players value a little bit more if they don't see the value in archaeology already.
Our next email comes in from Stora AS, an ore producer. To cheat or not to cheat? Hello, Joel and Pix. I've been working on a large project lately consisting of 10 identical segments. This has me trying the Ease of Life mod, Lightmatica. I have made the design in survival, which is the way I like to play the game, but I use the schematics to make sure that all the segments are built the same. However, when I found the easy placement feature in Lightmatica, I got into a bit of a dilemma. Placing blocks that are in your inventory just by right-clicking seems too easy. I know where to draw the line is up to every player, but what do you think? Where does the ease of life turn into quote-unquote cheating? Stora AS fell to a certain death after stepping on an imaginary slam, but survived when he realized he was wearing an Elytra.
Good to hear you survived. That's, always a bit tricky. Something I've had to avoid for a while in Survival Guide so far is jumping off stuff, imagining that I still have an elytra on when I don't, and I haven't been to the end yet. So yeah, I'm glad that existed for you. You've got your parachute equipped.
I feel like that's the thing that happens a lot in Lightmatica as you're walking around looking at a hologram of the build and the blocks that you want to place, and then you go to step on something that is just a hologram.
Yes,
you trip off and fall.
I've done it far too many times on the previous season of Empires. Like, when I started using Lightmatica, I immediately looked for the setting that allows you to toggle transparency, because opacity is really good for being able to, see a building without it like looking like a big ghostly mess. But then when you're actually building and you need to know when you can walk through something or when something isn't solid and you're going to fall through it, then being able to set a transparency level in that mod is essential, really.
So you're the expert, so I don't have a lot of insight into Lightmatica. I actually thought it was just a schematic mod, but I guess you could do blazing blocks with it as well, and it sounds like probably a lot more. I liked that Stora AS designed the build and survival first. I think there's a good balance there between survival building and then using the available tool to make life a bit easier. The only example that I can draw a comparison to is Zero's world map on the Citadel. We use both the world map and the mini map. The mini map gives us some like time and coordinates displays and a small kind of location about where you are and which direction you're facing. But the world map I use, and everybody else in the server uses, as just a top-down look at your area at large. However, the mod itself has things like flagging mobs in caves, showing you where the caves are, laying down waypoint markers, teleporting within the map. We just use it as a top-down map, and it's a small group of friends. We just use the honor system to say, look, it's just a map. We just feel like Minecraft should have a map. This is the prettiest one. It just happens that this mod has a lot of other stuff packed in, and I've used those other things because it's often a mod in something like an Olive Fabric mod pack when I've played modded Minecraft, and I've used the waypoints. They're very handy when you don't know the biomes, you don't know your location, you're in a new world, and you want to remember this is where home is, or this is where that diamond mine is that I found, or like whatever it is, you can mark stuff. It's very cool because then it shows up in the overworld, very similar to most modern video games where you can like put like a flag down and be like, oh, that's where I need to go. Don't forget to go back there. But I think that with all of these things, it's Stora AS hit it on the head. Like, it's up to you. Like, if you feel that this is too much, well, then you can just dial it back and not use that particular portion of it. And if you're on a server where there's a debate, then I think that there has to be a consensus where you just don't use that mod, or the mod is tweaked to the point where those features are not available in it. And I don't know, this might be something that had happened on Empires. I know you guys had a lot of custom mods and stuff put together in the game, but like, did you guys have any mods that did too much, but then you either tweaked them yourselves or had a, someone that you were getting the programming done by, remove any features from mods like that?
Most of the stuff we were dealing with on Empires was cosmetic, so there wasn't really anything that added stuff like that in. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the teleport feature of those minimap mods often relies on you having access to admin commands, right? So if you can't do a /TP to teleport yourself somewhere, you probably couldn't use the waypoint to teleport there, right? Unless maybe there's a toggle somewhere in the settings that allows you to do that.
There could be a toggle in the settings. I'm the wrong person to ask because I am the admin on the server, and so is Alistair. So like the two people that play, most have admin privileges. So I don't really remember. I just remember we didn't have to necessarily toggle it in the mod. No one wanted to dig into the mod. We just said, look, just don't use it. Don't use that feature.
Yeah.
I do know that it gives me teleport options when I am in the map. But I do know that I can go into the map settings in the Zero's map mod and turn off all the little radar dots that indicate like there's a skeleton over there. Over there. Like I can like unclick and say like, I don't want to ignore them. I want to completely don't show me them. So I'm not tempted at all, because when you see clusters of stuff, there's a cave, like you can see where things are. Things like seeing spiders, like, oh, there's a mine shaft down there. So like it removes a lot of the discovery out of it. So I just turn all that kind of stuff off.
Yeah. Like I think there are still aspects of, to bring it back to Litematica, there are aspects of Litematica which are gated behind having admin control over a server or having like creative mode privileges. To case in point, when I was designing my copper aging machine that does a bunch of stuff automatically, being able to copy paste the separate modules of 18 machines that will all grab the copper blocks as a flying machine goes past, I could not have done that as quickly as I did without Litematica, because you can just scroll the schematic over, hit a hotkey that you assign, and it will place another row of blocks for you. Like it will place that stuff and paste it into the world for you, as though you're using a clone command from the vanilla Minecraft command set, except it does it in a much easier, more visual way to understand. And so when I was designing that in creative in a flat world, it was invaluable to me. I loved using that functionality. But that's not available to you in survival. The only thing that Litematica can do in survival without access to that is easy placement mode, which is what I think Stora was talking about, which doesn't necessarily place the blocks for you, but what it does is if you right-click on a block, it will place the correct block there regardless of whether or not it was in your hotbar. Like, it will effectively do the work of pick blocking for you at an instantaneous speed. So if you have a wall that's a bunch of different blocks, so you're texturing a build with stone and cracked stone bricks and deep slate and that kind of stuff, if you just hold down right-click and look at each of those blocks in turn, it will cycle them out of your hotbar and into being able to place it in the world without you having to open your inventory at any point. And so for some people, that's cheating because it's placing blocks faster than you would be physically able to just using the standard keyboard controls, right? And so some people, it just doesn't feel all that good. Easy placement mode for me is where I tend to draw the line anyway, because the main problem I have with it is it allows you to place blocks mid-air without supporting blocks, which is something you can't even do in creative mode, at least not without commands and using set block or something like that. And that really feels like the cheatiest thing it can do. It has been very tempting, especially when I'm building custom trees, because whenever you're building those in Litematica, I typically build stuff layer by layer, and I'll just hit page up on my keyboard and then it will show me the next layer, and then I can kind of climb up without having to scaffold up and down to get to higher parts of the build. And obviously, if you're building custom trees, you have sections of the tree, branches that will like dangle down. And so after a while, you reach a point where you're placing a leaf block 5 blocks out from the trunk in midair. And you have to make a bunch of temporary blocks to put that there before you kind of go back. Either that, or you figure out a different way of building the tree, a different order for it, right? But I find that aspect of it, that's the point at which you go, oh, if I could just place a block like there in midair, like that 5 blocks away from anything else, it makes it very convenient to do. But again, you would not be able to do that without running a set block command or a fill command or something like that in creative mode. So that's the kind of stuff where I think it's cheaty if it's doing something that you can't do with survival mechanics, and it's not saving you time at that point, it's performing an action that you couldn't naturally perform. But obvious caveat, and we've talked about this a little already, if cheating doesn't have a victim, it's much less of a concern for me. And if what you feel like you are cheating is you're cheating yourself out of the experience of building this in what you consider to be a legit way, then, like, yeah, it's an honor system thing. By all means, do what you want to do. Like, but I think if it's going to save you time, if it means that the limited amount of time you have to play Minecraft in your day can be used more effectively, especially with these larger builds and stuff like that, I do think it's something that's worth considering if it helps you get more out of the game instead of feeling like your time was wasted doing it the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I look at the quality of life stuff is I only have a limited amount of time to play Minecraft, as do most of the other players on the server with me on the Citadel, and we just look at that stuff as like ways that we can speed things up just a little bit without pushing the envelope. Like, I am the admin. If I wanted to, I could just give myself a stack of something, which I don't do because I don't want, that's not the game experience that I want. But we did change some of the recipes in the data pack that I wrote for the stonecutter for wood. and I get more trapdoors. I can put a log in, and I think I get 8 trapdoors out or something like that. It's more than the vanilla recipe. It's a small tweak, but it saves me a ton of time.
Yeah.
And to me, it also kind of makes sense. Like I'm surprised that this spinny blade thing in Minecraft doesn't cut wood. Or there's not a sister block called the woodcutter that I could use to do the exact same thing. And I also think that, because of it's also a mechanic that exists in the game and how you cut stone, and it feels better than drawing stairs, in the crafting interface and making stairs. It feels cooler to put a block into a stone cutter and get a stair out. It makes cool noise. Like, it just makes more sense. And so that's the kind of stuff where there's a few tweaks, but there's a line. When I was writing that data pack, I could have had that, that log to trapdoor recipe give me as many trapdoors as I wanted. It could have been a stack, but I didn't do that. I kind of looked at the trapdoor, looked at how many you get from the vanilla recipe, looked at the size of it compared to a plank and a log, and thought okay, well, there's going to be some loss. It's we'll just 8. 8 is fine. That's a good kind of round number, for Minecraft. And that's where I stuck with it. Right. And I think that it's the spirit of how you approach it, it's the whole cheating, not cheating thing is tricky unless there's already established rules. That's the difference. If it's just you, then it's just you and you can kind of make up your own. But if you're on a server that has rules, then just obey those rules and you wouldn't be considered, cheating. But I think that's the thing is if you're worried about that experience, what you end up cheating is you're cheating yourself the experience of playing Minecraft. And I think that's a good way to look at it, because I don't want to have to spend hours and hours and hours to do stuff in the game when I only have, let's say, 10 hours a week that I can play,
Yeah, it's definitely about what you find fun. And if you're not finding it fun to chop down all of the extra wood required to make all of those trapdoors, then change the trapdoor crafting recipe. Add that stuff in. It makes sense. The third email comes in from Caitlin Z, or possibly Caitlin Z, depending on where you're from. And the subject is Max Enchantment Clues. Hi. With all of the wonderful quality of life and accessibility changes being made recently, I've been thinking that it would be nice to have some sort of indicator when you've reached the maximum level of enchantment on an item. For me, I tend to get confused which enchantments max out at level 3 versus level 4 or level 5. When researching to write in with this question, I even discovered that some cap out at level 2, and that's not even considering the ones that only have 1 level. My thought is a symbol at the end, such as a star or a diamond shape, so it would read Unbreaking 3, Diamond, or even having the symbol before it, like Diamond, Unbreaking 3. Would love to hear your thoughts on this or any alternate suggestions. Thank you so much and have a great day. Caitlin is happily alive and well, fishing up treasure from her dock.
Yay, Caitlin is alive.
Hey, we got one.
I question their life choices, but alive nonetheless. I'm not a fisher.
Hey, as somebody who did an episode all about fishing and Survival Guide recently, I find it quite peaceful. I think it's, especially in the early game, a pretty fun way of getting hold of some name tags and whatnot. But I think once you're as established as you are, you've really got no need to go fishing on the Citadel anymore.
No, not 6 years in fishing for stuff. Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with Caitlin, though. I have always and still find it impossible to remember all of the enchantments, what the max level is. Do I have a few memorized? Sure, like Unbreaking 3. I get it. But I'm not constantly restarting my world and working through those enchanting progressions and getting geared up, so they're not top of mind. I always have to look up enchantments outside of the game, trying to figure out which enchantments I want, what the level is that they go to, what enchantments conflict with one another. Like if I put, smite on this, does that change with sharpness? How do I, max out this sword or max out this axe in a way that I want it to work? I remember recently I had to replace an axe, and I went through that. I didn't look it up online. I think I was asking the live chat, and they were filling me in. Most modern games would give you sort of like a rollover or explanation as to what the enchantment does and what its max level might be. Really good example of this actually in the Mojang sphere is Minecraft Dungeons. When you had all these enchantments that were new to you, you just kind of put your mouse over it and kind of explained what it did, what each level did, and it showed you level 1, 2, 3, and you would assume that level 3 would be the max because there's no level 4 shown, right? And I think that was a very clear way of doing it. I think Mojang can go with a triple whammy here. 2, I think, are pretty straightforward, but I think a third would be kind of pie in the sky, but we'll see. I think a symbol is a good idea. I think something graphically based in the text on the enchantment would make sense. I also think changing a color on the enchantment would be good, because rather than looking for a specific symbol, if I could just look to see that the enchantment on my pickaxe, there's 3 blue and 1 white, I would know that the white one is not yet max and the other ones were. I know color is not the best sole indicator for stuff like that, and that's why I think that a symbol and color would work. Ideally, you want to use as many different indicators as you can and still have it look, aesthetically pleasing. And kind of a pie in the sky here, I would like if you had all max enchantments, or all of the enchantments currently on your pickaxe or whatever tool you want to use, were all maxed out, that there could be some sort of graphical change to either the enchantment glint, which people can either then turn on or turn off, because if they don't like this reward, then they can just remove it, or like something like a graphical change to the texture, like a golden band around the handle, or something on the pommel of the pickaxe or sword. Just something to say, I've gone through the work. This is now a max level sword or a max level pickaxe. I just think that would be neat. I'm sure it opens up a whole can of worms for like PvP and like all that kind of stuff. I just thought that would be both an in-game indicator to you when you look in your inventory, like the one with the gold handle is the max one, the one without is I'm still working on it. It'd be kind of a cool mini game, like pat it yourself on the back. Hey, you've got max enchants on a pickaxe. That takes some work and some game knowledge. Like stuff like that I think could be done, because I do feel enchantments were like the first experience for me in Minecraft, and I think the most memorable, where I was just like, this game isn't telling me anything. I need to go look it up on the internet. Yeah. And that's where I'm just like, I'm left the game now, and I'm now, instead of playing the game, I'm scrolling through a wiki trying to figure out how the heck this works. And that's where I got lost. And I did have friends to help me out, but that was it, right? You're kind of on your own.
Yeah, enchanting is one of the mechanics where the game's desire to explain itself to you and be intuitive rubs up against the game's desire to be mysterious about certain things. And again, this is one of the things which the Japanese player who's doing a completely unspoiled playthrough, Piropito, is completely unaware of how leveling up an enchantment table works. Like, he's never put bookshelves around an enchantment table because the game doesn't really explain that to you anywhere. And so, yeah, there are still elements like that in which enchantment is kind of obtuse, and you do need to rely on community knowledge for it. I definitely agree that it would be really nice to have a symbol of some kind, but then again, you've got to know what that symbol means, what the symbol does, and adding multiple symbols at that point would be potentially a little confusing. But once you've understood that yes, a diamond means maxed out, no longer can't be enchanted any higher, it's certainly easier than memorizing that yes, Unbreaking caps at level 3, Protection enchantments cap at 4, Damage and Efficiency enchantments cap at 5, Knockback and Punch cap at 2. And, while we were talking earlier about the subject of parity changes for Bedrock Edition, I'm pretty sure the enchantments without tiers still have a tier indicator on Bedrock Edition. They're like Mending 1 and Silk Touch 1, which implies the existence of higher levels even if they don't have them. So that can be confusing for first-time players as well. And I do think it's potentially a sign that the enchanting system needs an overhaul, and maybe they'll get around to that in future anyway. So that might be why these things haven't been adjusted for, accessibility and approachability when some of the other systems in the game have. But I am kind of curious if there's something that they can do to indicate that, because it would certainly help players a lot to understand that, Unbreaking 3 is the best you're going to get. The one I always forget is Piercing, which is something I don't interact with all that much because I don't use crossbows very often, but there's an achievement for hitting 5 things, killing 5 mobs with the same crossbow arrow, right? And so my brain immediately goes, okay, so I need piercing 5 for that, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. But actually you need piercing 4, because it only needs to go through 4 things to hit the 5th thing. But like in my brain, I equate it with stuff like smite and, sharpness, where the maximum tier is 5, but it doesn't do more damage, it just allows the arrow to persist through multiple targets. And there's stuff like that still trips me up with all the experience I have with this game at this point, that still doesn't quite click in my brain. So I do think in the long term it would be massively beneficial to have some kind of indicator that the enchantment is maxed out now.
And in the short term, Alistair from our live chat has sent in a link to enchanted tooltips. So, Caitlin, if you want to venture into the world of modded as a quality of life mod rather than anything that's going to really change your gameplay, this is just a tooltip. When you hover over, like say a pair of iron boots that has feather falling 4, it says reduces fall damage, max level 4 applies to boots. Like really straightforward. It kind of lists all that information in the same kind of window as you would normally see multiple enchantments. The, I think, drawback, which I can't see in any of the screenshots here, would be if you had 4 or 5, maybe not 5, but if you had 4 enchantments on one piece of equipment, this text box would be massive because it would then show you like what each one does for each level of thing. What I do like about it is that when you hover over the enchantments in the enchanting table, it says knockback 1 increases knockback, max level 2 applies to swords. So it tells you what you could use it on. It's just a hover over tooltip. So in the meantime, we'll have a link for that in the email section of the show notes this week. Makes
sense. And yeah, I think enchanting still wants to feel like a mysterious mechanic. So having stuff like that just presents itself to you fully informative is maybe not quite the way to go. But yeah, there's a nice middle ground to be found there, I think.
Last email of the main show comes in from Fire Dragon 19. Cherry blossom petal placement. Say that 6 times fast. Hi, Joel and Johnny. I recently found your podcast and love all the information and perspectives you both give. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoy 1.20 and have updated my world where I am building a Japanese-inspired area in an old taiga. The cherry trees look fantastic, and I love placing the petals. The problem is you can't place them on stone brick, which is disappointing. You can place moss carpet on stone brick, so my question is, do you think Mojang should or will update cherry blossom petals to be placed on all blocks? Fire Dragon 19 died while trying to place cherry blossom petals on a stone brick to make the ambience complete.
Probably died of frustration, I think.
It's like wow.
Cause of death this time. The petals are an interesting one. It's been tripping a lot of people up, and I think the reason is that the name is slightly misleading. Because if you look at the petals, they're actually closer to flowers. There is a stalk below each one connecting it to the block. So petals have a sort of identity crisis because their name and the environment that you find them in supposes that they've fallen from the trees above, but their design makes it look like they've grown from the ground.
I agree with you. I think the name is where people are getting tripped up. I haven't placed them or tried to place them on anything that wasn't grass. So I've not been disappointed until just today. And I was like, oh, you can't place them on stone? That sucks. Because I think that would be a great way to put them in there. But like the first thing I noticed is like, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure they have stems. I looked it up and you're right. I don't think that they have so much happening underneath them that they couldn't be placed on something like a stone brick. Like not stone, but like a stone brick because it has cracks in it. And I feel like if you've got a mossy stone brick, then it would be nice to be able to do that. Now, maybe the alternative solution would be to have a flowery stone brick where you craft a new block and you combine pink petals and a stone brick and you get like a pinky, block that looks like it has flowers growing out through the cracks. That could be interesting. But yeah, I think that it would be a welcome change. I'm surprised that it doesn't work like because things like what works similar. Sea pickles, the candles, you can kind of place them on anything.
Yeah, coral fans and that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. It'll die if it's not placed next to water, but you can still put it on a stone block. Like most of the places I planted those were on, I think, slabs of mossy cobblestone, so that I could waterlog a slab, but you'll still be able to place them there. So there's such a It's interesting that it's organic stuff, really, that you got to think about because the notion of coral is an animal, so maybe it can form a colony of sorts on any kind of material realistically. But again, we're stretching too far into the bounds of realism here. I really would like to be able to place petals on everything, and because they are such a diverse block for decoration already, I think the only reason that you can't is the same reason you can't place a lantern attached to the side of a block. It's the kind of restrictions breeding creativity kind of thing. But I've seen people do some very creative stuff with petals. I saw a Reddit post earlier today in which somebody was pointing out that because they occupy only a quarter block and they are available in these different kind of formations where they kind of add a quarter to a block, they're really good at drawing circles, because you can kind of arrange them so that they form an outline of a circle, but only within like a 3x3 block area, and it still looks like a circular pattern more so than building, a diamond out of blocks of some other kind would. And it reminds me a lot of the areas that you sometimes find these little woodland spirits in the Legend of Zelda games, and they're in these kind of fairy circles of flowers, and you've got to hunt them down in order to upgrade your inventory capacity or something like that. But it's a really nice way of using them. But again, limited to just placing them on organic blocks, because if you try and do stuff like this in a stone courtyard, it's not going to let you do it.
Kija in our community posted a link earlier this week that I stole and then posted in my Discord, and it was using the petals and, again, the way that you place them and the way that you have that control to create a gradient of the petals slowly going from full-on pink, coverage to dithering down into just green between moss and petals. And it was really effective, and I can see that happening in all kinds of cool ways. And it would be amazing if you could also do that on other blocks like stone, things like that,
or on vertical surfaces, because it has to be like placed on the ground, right?
Well, yeah, I guess it would be cool if you could do that on the ground. Yeah, I guess that would be tricky, but I get there's all kinds of stuff that you can place on the ground that you can't place on the sides of the stuff.
Sure,
like Minecraft already has that. So man, if you could do this vertically, give me some green stuff like this, and I would have a field day.
Yeah,
trying to decorating mossy custom vines and all that kind of stuff, where you're not dealing with just like a full block of resolution to create like a vine or a mossy thing. Because right now I do it with like leaf blocks and things like that. But I think this would be really, really cool. Can you? This is a kind of a silly question probably, but can you place pink petals on top of cherry blossoms?
I don't think you can. I don't think they go on top of leaf blocks, because
a
lot of stuff can't be placed on leaf blocks to begin with, so I don't think these would necessarily be an exception to that. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm woefully behind on all the cherry experimentation, because like we said before, it doesn't really go with West Hill, so I've only got a limited amount of experience with it. But I like how flexible they are, and I'm really looking forward to putting them in that graveyard on the Citadel, because I think that's where I'm going to have some fun with decorating them around. What I liked so much about them in the little bit of time I had with them this week was how quickly I could make the flowers in front of Cosmic's collection area look random. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like it you don't have to really think too hard about making things random when you can kind of like just spin yourself around a couple of ways, click 3 or 4 times, and be just like, yeah, looks like a patch of flowers. Like, done. I really enjoy that aspect of them, and I'm curious to play with them more.
It's something you can do. You can basically set up a 5x5 area of these pink petals in different formations, and it can still look organic compared to a 5x5 field of just dandelions, which just looks like you've planted 25 dandelions in a square. Yeah. That's really the difference that they give. Well, folks, that's where we're going to cut things off for today. We do have one more listener email that we're going to address in the render distance, so if you're interested in hearing more emails with your Chunk Mail Dispenser episode, consider signing up to our Patreon. But that's going to be it for this episode. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, as we've been saying, consider putting some value back in over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live if you're around when we record it every week. Our monthly Minecraft audio hangout is coming up, and we have all kinds of other Patreon events that you'll be interested in. We currently have 311 patrons, which is up 2 from last week, and we also have to announce the addition of a new content engineer patrons. This is our highest tier of patron support, so we're always incredibly grateful, and those people get a special thank you here at the end of the show. So thank you to Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Party Voyager, and Yitz, and new addition Mind Trip Media. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance. Shake them and tell them you should listen on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. I mean, shake them friendly. Be nice about it. But like encouragement is encouraged. Yeah, I talk for a living. It's okay. If you would like to leave us a review on your favorite platform, that's also a great way to have the podcast reach new listeners. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide Season 3 is currently being uploaded Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. My Twitch channel is on hiatus while my PC is being repaired, but you can drop a follow at twitch.tv/PixelRiffs for when the streams resume. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft Recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online is at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to the Citadel Cafe, my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I'm Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Everything is Minecraft except for Friday, where I'm nearing the completion of the Ecto-1 Ghostbusters vehicle build, and it has been very, very cool. Really happy with that. The rest of the time I'm working on Westel, as you can imagine.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but the mail still arrives on time.